Welcome to today's webinar on budget cycle powered by FP&A Professionals Institute. We'll be walking you through the entire budget cycle end to end, whatever happens during the budget season in big companies. Usually it's a 2 to 3 month process, and a lot of people have questions and they reach out to me. What happens during those 2 to 3 months? Especially a lot of people, although they are working in finance and FP&A, they don't get an opportunity to work on budgets firsthand. So they might be involved in the budgeting process in bits and pieces, but a lot of people don't get that opportunity to work on budgets directly. That is where we will try to address all of your questions. And I'm sure some of you might be doing this in your organizations as well. So it'll be interesting to know your experience, especially if you're already doing budgets in your organization and if you are involved in that process actively. Okay, so we'll get started quickly. I just wanted to know, and you can put this in the chat box. How many of you have worked on budget in your organization? Type me in the chat box if you have been a part of a budgeting process in your organization. So just type me in the chat box so that I know how many people have already seen this in their organization. Okay, so we have about 20 people and I just see one me in the chat box. Okay, so Naveen says me, Alessandro says me. So about three of 20. So maybe about, I can say 10% or maybe 20% of you have seen the budgeting process. Okay. So okay, Cassandra has also seen it. So maybe four out of 20. So okay. Has also seen it. Manshit has also seen. So I think a lot of people have seen it. So it will be even more interactive. So feel free to, I'll take pauses in between. And if you have any comments you want to add based on your experience, we can do that as and when we go through the webinar. Okay, quick introduction. Before that, a quick roadmap of today's session. So we'll just quickly maybe spend just 2 minutes on what is budgeting, why budgeting is important, as some of you might not be knowing the basics of budgeting. A lot of people are joining the webinar as freshers. So just 2 minutes on this. And then we'll get into the budget cycle, which is the main agenda for this webinar. We'll talk about the three important phases: the planning phase, the execution phase, and the review phase. So this is the entire session of 60 minutes where we will spend good amount of time understanding each and every part of the budgeting cycle and also what happens in each of it and why it is important. A quick introduction about me. I have been working in finance and FP&A for over 15 years now. Especially in FP&A, I've spent more than a decade working across different sectors: banking, pharma, and tech organizations like Citi, Pfizer, Coursera. Most recently, I was FP&A lead for India and APAC at Coursera. In 2023, I co-founded FP&A Professionals Institute, which was earlier a blog which 85,000 people used to read every week on LinkedIn. So we used that audience, and a lot of people requested us for trainings, and we went into full time as FP&A Professionals Institute. In the last 3 years, we've trained more than 3,000. I have trained more than 3,000 professionals across the different programs. Also, I have authored a couple of books from accounting to FP&A and all about FP&A, which are Amazon bestsellers, have been Amazon bestsellers in its category for a while. A quick intro about FP&A Professional Institute. So we have been working on FP&A training since a while. My partner, who is not here today, he was the first. His FP&A Foundations course was the first course on FP&A on Udemy back 7 years back in 2018. I published my first book in 2022. That's when we connected together and we started our first live program, which is FP&A Masterclass. Right now, it has done more than 18 cohorts. 500 plus students have taken that program. 2023, we went into this full time and we launched more programs which were requested by our alumni from FP&A Masterclass. We made the FP&A Masterclass available as a self-paced version. We launched the financial modeling for FP&A, which has done 10 cohorts, 200 plus students, and then other programs like AI for financial FP&A and the 6-month in-depth certified global FP&A professional certification, which we will talk about more in the session as we go further. Yeah. So overall, FPI has trained more than 3,500 students across all of these programs. Before we get into the budgeting cycle, just I mentioned that I'll spend maybe 2-3 minutes on the background. So what is FP&A? A lot of people may not be aware of what actually FP&A team does. So if I have to just quickly summarize what FP&A team does, it acts as a bridge between your business teams. You see the business teams on the right, like business and functional teams on the right, on the left, which is sales, marketing, product, engineering, HR operations. So they work with business teams and operations teams and functional teams, which you see on the left, and also the senior management on the right. So senior management is your CEO, one level below CEO, CFO, head of marketing, head of product. So that is your senior management. and they act as a bridge between your business teams and your senior management. If you pick up any activity, we'll come to some activities in the next slide. So if you pick up any of these activities at FP&A from budgeting, forecasting, variance analysis, profitability analysis, what essentially they are doing is they are collecting inputs and comments and analysis from the business teams and then presenting it to the senior management so that they can make business decisions which are sounded and which are grounded in data. So in any a function, say forecasting, they would go back to the business teams, FP&A teams, and then they will collect inputs, make sure that those forecasts are accurate or are realistic, and then the forecast to the senior management. Same goes with variance analysis. Same goes with profitability analysis. So these are four key pillars, and FP&A's role is to act as a bridge between the business teams and the senior management. Okay. Before we get into the budget cycle, I wanted to share the typical FP&A month. I'm sure you must have seen this in one of the other videos that we do. So we'll not get into the detail of this. I'll just quickly do this as an overview. So if you had to divide the FP&A typical month into week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, you would see a lot of reporting and management accounting happening in week 1. So week 1 is usually updating flash reports, making sure that the accounts, books of accounts are closed and you review it with the accounting team. And then you start preparing your management reports, management reporting packs, whatever you want to call it, which is sent to the different business teams in the organization. Typically, this happens in the second week is about forecasting. You pick up the last version of the forecast. You update the historicals. You make say for example, you right now in March you pick up the 2+10 forecast, 1+11 forecast. You actualize the February actuals and you make it 2+10, and then you update the remaining 10 months, get it reviewed from the CFO, get it reviewed from the business teams, and then that is what you do typically in week 2. Week 3 is more of ad hoc analysis, automation, making sure that you keep an eye on the risk and opportunities for the forecast that you have submitted in the previous week. And week 4 is preparation for week 1, where you start again the flash reporting, maybe at business day -4, business day -3, which is the end of the month, and then you continue preparing for the week 1, which is your management reporting and your. So typically you end up rolling forward and you start preparing for the week 1 in week 4, which is, as a simple example, I can say that you start preparing for your files, you roll forward your models, you make sure that everything is ready when you come to week 1. And whenever you have to send out those management reports, those are ready. You just have to update the links in week 1 and review it and send it. So a lot of preparation work goes in week 4. Typically, this is how average FP&A calendar looks like. Again, this is not a standard calendar. So if the FP&A team is more mature, you might see week 2 activities happening in week 1. If it's a new FP&A team or if it's a new finance team setup, you might see a lot of week 1 activities also happening in week 2 and week 3. So this is a typical average of 25 different organizations. And I would say this is probably a lot of organizations would be happy as a finance team to be working with, which is reporting first week, get to the forecast as soon as possible, maybe by the mid of the second week, then spend the rest of the week 2 and week 3 on analysis, ad hoc project automation, and then get back into the month-end mode when you come to week. Typically, this is the month-end process. This is a typical calendar. One thing that this is missing is the budget process, because budget is not a monthly process. Budget is an annual process that happens once in a year. Typically, for a company which has a calendar year from Jan to December, it happens somewhere in September, October in the previous year for doing the budgets and plan for the next year. So that's why you don't see that in the typical monthly FP&A calendar, because it's not a monthly activity. It happens once in a year, more sort of a one-time project in a year in case of FP&A teams. Okay, quickly budgeting. What happens in budgeting? So usually businesses have long-term vision, long-term goals. For example, in this case, the company has long-term goal to double its turnover, triple its profit, get into 4 more countries, add additional headcount of 1,000 people in the next 6 years. Okay, so this is your vision for the next 5 to 6 years. Now, what budget does is it breaks down that long-term vision into achievable, manageable, short-term targets, which is the annual business plan. A lot of people call this as an annual operating plan, annual business plan, budgets. So it has different names, but typically what it does is it gives you a P&L for the upcoming financial year. It gives you a mini P&L, or you can say it gives you the numbers for the next financial year, how you are expected to operate. So this is what the budget does. It gives you the target, or it gives you something to aim for in the form of numbers and in the form of an income statement, so that you can use that for the as targets in the next financial year. Okay, so this is what typically a budget is. A lot of people call it as budget, targets, plan, commitment. It has different names. Essentially what you're doing is you're preparing a income statement for the next 12 months. Let me take a pause here and see if there are any questions before whatever, based on whatever we've covered. If you have a question, you can raise hand. I will be happy, or you can put it in the chat box. Either way, it's fine. Okay, I'll give it a 10-second pause, and if there are no questions, I can move to the next concept, which is tops down and bottoms up budgeting. Okay, I don't see any. Okay, would you be sharing this PPT? So you will be getting this recording. You can watch this recording as many times as you want, which will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So I'll give you the YouTube channel link also. You can subscribe to that if you want to. It will be uploaded on that. The recording will be edited and uploaded there. There's a question from Himadar. Should we do budgeting annually? An annual plan for startups to business yet to commence its operations? So that's a good question. So yes, in any organization, be it small or big, budgets are usually done as an annual activity. Even if the startup is yet to commence its operation, you might want to still budget for a lot of initial investments, cost, a lot of initial, maybe the business will not make any money in the immediate year, or maybe the immediate few months, although you might be incurring a lot of cost to set up the business, to pay salaries, and maybe more expenses will be incurred, right? Usually in a business. So for the expense part, definitely you will need the budget. Maybe if you don't have revenues for the next 1 year, that is okay. But for the expense side, at least you will need the budget for sure. Alice Gentro is saying, thank you for sharing on the recording. Yes, let me do that. So what I'll do is, not just this webinar, we do a webinar almost every week. So we do this almost every Thursday. So I would give you the link to our YouTube channel, and I'll just show it to you as well. So if you notice, you would find recordings of all our webinars. So if you want to just scroll through, there are, I don't know, more than 30 webinars we must have done in the last 2 years. So if you want, you can just subscribe to this YouTube channel and you can access all of those webinars and also get notified whenever the new webinar is updated. So I would highly encourage you to subscribe to this, and so that you can get notifications on all the webinars that we do, even if you're not joining them live. Okay. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so now that we have understood what budget is, what I will do is I will quickly ask, and especially for people who mentioned that, right, they've been a part of the budgeting process. I saw 5-6 people type me in the chat box, especially to those folks. What is the difference between top-down and bottoms-up budgeting? This is an important concept to clarify before we get into the budgeting cycle, which is the planning, execution, and review, that the entire budget cycle that we had seen in the beginning of the webinar. So just type your responses in the chat box. What do you think is top-down budgeting? What do you think is bottom-up budgeting? What is the difference between top-down budgeting and bottom-up budgeting? Let's see if you are able to articulate it in 1 or 2 sentences. Okay, don't overthink it. Whatever comes to your mind, you can just put that in the chat box. Okay, Himadar says bottom up start from the lowest level of details, top down start from macro indicators. Okay, what else? I'm looking for a couple of keywords, a couple of important conceptual words which are defining top down and bottoms up. Okay, so top down budget is coming from the senior management. Okay, so they come as a directive from the CEO or somebody in the senior management team. So typically they will not take any inputs, or they will not take inputs from the department managers who are actually going to deliver that budget in the next year. So they will give the targets based on their judgment, based on their business understanding. And typically it's a top-down approach. That is what the top-down approach is. Yeah. So when you say top-down is from the higher level, from the management. Exactly. What about the bottoms up? And already we have bottoms up. Bottoms up is from the lowest level. So that is right. What happens in the bottoms up budgeting is the departments submit their inputs. BFM collects the inputs from the departments and collate the budget or compile the budget from the bottoms up, meaning they collect the budget from each and every department and then consolidate together to get to the company level budget. So that is the difference between the top down and bottoms up budgeting. So this was important to know. What we will be doing in the next 20 minutes or so, which is the budget cycle process, we will be more focusing on the bottoms up budget. So here we will be talking and discussing what happens in a bottoms up budget process. Although top down budget is related and linked to it, we will discuss what are the connections. But essentially, what we will be discussing in the next 15 to 20 minutes will be the bottoms up budget, what happens in most organizations. Okay, so the bottoms up budget process, annual budgeting cycle, the planning stage, the exercise stage, and the review and consolidation stage. These are the three different stages. We will go into each of these stages one by one. After every stage, I'll take a quick pause, see if there are any questions, and then we can move to the next one. Okay, so let's talk about the planning phase first. Planning phase is divided typically into two parts. One is the development of budget guidelines or typically rules for the entire budgeting process, the 2 to 3 month cycle, which is going to be involving a lot of people. So usually teams would come up with certain guidelines that are required to be followed by everybody so that there is no chaos. The budget gets managed and everybody knows what to expect out of the entire budget process. So guidelines is one of the important part of the planning process, which is part one. And the second part of the planning is on the budgeting calendar, which we will come to in a moment or two. So let's talk about guidelines first. So what happens in the guidelines is that it would sit with the senior management and write certain rules that everybody in the organization needs to follow, whoever is working on the budgeting process. Why this is important? Again, I mentioned that to avoid misunderstandings, to avoid what do you say is in terms of the expectations need to be managed. So everybody in the organization who is working on the budget should know when the inputs are expected to be submitted, what is the quality of the inputs expected, what will be the questions be asked if the inputs are not submitted. So all of these need to be understood by different teams, and for these purposes, the budget guidelines are there. And the objective of these guidelines is to improve the quality of the entire budgeting process. I'll give you some examples of the budgeting guidelines. Again, these are not supposed to be budget guidelines for all companies. These are just some examples, just so that I can share with you how they may look like. But typically, your organization might have completely different budget guidelines. They may not have any of these. Okay, so these are just examples. You can just use it as a reference material. Ideally, every organization would have very specific guidelines tailored to their experience, whatever they have seen in the past budgeting cycles. A lot of these guidelines are developed from experience of working in 1, 2, 3 budget cycles to avoid any roadblock that you had seen in the previous or the immediate previous budget cycle. To prevent that from happening again, you typically put in a guideline so that it doesn't repeat. The issue doesn't repeat again what happened in the previous cycle. I'll give you some examples. One of the example, budget should be submitted using the provided templates to maintain consistency. Okay, why is this a budget guideline? What do you think? If we don't give this as a guideline, what will happen? Can somebody type in the chat box? Budget should be submitted using provided templates to maintain consistency. If you don't have defined templates or if you don't have standard submission mechanism, what will happen is the different teams will submit their numbers in whatever format they like. And then it will be very difficult for the team to review those numbers and consolidate those numbers, especially if there are many departments or many teams. That is the purpose of this particular budgeting guide. Another one, detailed justification must be provided for any variances from the previous year budget. Okay, so this is typically what happens in the incremental budgeting process. So what happens in the incremental budgeting process is you take the last year number as a base, last year actual or forecast as a base, and then you are okay for the teams to have that at least, and then they can add some percentage to get more money or to get more. So typically, it's based on the previous year number. Okay, so what we are saying here, in case of that, wherever we are using incremental budgeting, there should be some justification provided for any significant deviations from the previous year budget. Last time, if you had requested for 100, say for example, $100, and if you're requesting for 105, that should be okay. But instead of 100, if you're requesting for 125, then there should be some justification provided. Why do you need the extra $25? Okay, just as an example. Okay, again, these are guidelines. I will not go through each and every one of them. Otherwise, we might spend the entire hour in this only. I'll bring them up on the screen quickly one by one, and maybe I can spend maybe one more. Okay. Another guideline. Okay. Once a quarter is over, so once the 3 months or the quarter is over, any unused budget will be sent back to the government. Again, this could be a very specific guideline to that particular company. You don't have to follow it. You may not have this. So these are some examples of budgeting guidelines. I'll take a quick pause here, see if there are any questions, or if you want me to highlight any of these, right? Others which I have not covered, I can do that. So I'll give you 30 seconds, just read through it. If you have any questions on the budgeting guidelines, maybe I can throw some light on that. Okay, all good. So we go to the second part of the planning phase, which is now we are done with the budget guidelines. Now we will move to the second phase, which is the budget calendar and the budget templates. What happens in a budget calendar? So can you, especially if you have ever been, I am sure all of you have been this process. So what happened when you prepared for your board exams in the 10th or the 12th for people who are in India, especially? How did you approach your board exams, which was the 10th standard exams or the 12th standard exams or the graduation exam, right? Any important exams, how do you approach that? Can you maybe type few comments in the chat box? What do you do for that exam? Typically, when you have a very important exam, especially or an important life event, it could be any other, it could be even an important event like your marriage or like I don't know, 25th anniversary, right? What do you do when you have an important exam or an important event? Type some comments in the chat box. Okay, so you typically don't. I see some comments in my DM. So you typically plan for it in advance. You don't show up just, yeah, we do plan for it in advance. You don't show up, you prepare well, yes. You don't show up 2 days before the event, right? You just don't show up 2 days before the exam and expect you to clear that exam or expect you to have that event successfully happen. Okay, so similarly, this budget is one of the important corporate event, you can call it. It is one of the most important, if not the most important, it is one of the most important corporate events in the organization. And because it's a big event and a big thing in the company, it is very similar to like you prepare for your marriage or your for any important exam. So what happens? I'll just give you an example of an exam. So when I used to give my exams, say in 10th standard or 12th standard, I used to know exactly when my final exams are. So for example, my final exams are in the month of December, and right now I am in the month of March. I know I have 9 months to prepare for that exam. So what I would do is, okay, December is my final examination. So let me make sure that I complete the entire syllabus from March to, I would say, June. Okay, I would maybe spend 4 months studying for the exam. And after that, I would keep maybe a month or two for revisions. Okay, so maybe July to September, I would keep for a round of revisions. September, I would want to test myself. I would want to give some test exams, mock exams. Maybe October, I would give some mock exams. It might be the first set of mock exams. I would want to see the results and work on my, based on the result, I would want to figure out what my weak areas are. And then I have another 1 month or 2 months to prepare well for working on my weak areas. So again, I do the revision and I would work, make sure that whatever my weaknesses are, I would make sure I perfect that particular part. Very similar process happens in the budgeting, in the corporate budgeting. So you have typically your board review somewhere in December in the calendar month, somewhere in November, December. So CEO typically will act like he is going for an important exam. So he would want to do the review first level of mock reviews 1 month at least before the board review is there. 15th of December, in this case, the board review is there for the approval of budget. The CEO and the CFO would want to review the entire budget thoroughly 1 month at least before that, so that if there are any changes required, they have enough time to do that. Similar to that exam. Now that CEO has announced that 15th November, I want to review the budget thoroughly. What will happen is FP&A team will work backwards. They will tell themselves, okay, the CEO wants to review it on 15th of November. So by 30th of October, at least we should have the consolidated numbers from every department. Okay? So they will again work backwards and they will say by 30th of October, let's target to have the consolidated reviews with all the departments and all the business units. Now, to be able to do that on 30th of October, they will need to make sure that the budget input templates are out by 30th of September or maybe somewhere in September. They have meetings and discussions with the different business teams. Make sure that they are comfortable with those templates. Make sure that they are filling those templates and getting them back by September. Okay, now, for this to happen, for you to receive the final templates by September, you want to make sure that you start planning for it, which is the budget calendar, which we are looking at right now, right? And the budget guidelines, all of this needs to happen maybe somewhere in the end of August, or maybe so you do this end of August, mid of August. Aim for getting all the submissions by end of September. The FP&A team might take a couple of weeks to review and consolidate everything and go back and forth between the teams to ask questions. And once they are satisfied at the end of October, they might schedule the review between the 30th. Now I'll go from left to right. I have given you the backward explanation. Let me go from left to right. So what happens? You typically plan for the budget 2 to 3 months ahead of time. So you create those guidelines. Typically, they are guidelines already there from the previous budgeting cycle. You just review them. Maybe you want to add a couple of them, or maybe make some changes here and there. You can use and send out a budgeting guideline along with the milestones. Okay, these are the guidelines and these are the different dates which we expect, which is the budget calendar, to the different business teams and to the different teams who are going to be part of the budget. So this is typically what happens in the month of August or September. Now, next is the preparation or creation of templates. So FP&A team will create templates which are going to be shared with different business teams. And these are not just Excel files. They are well planned and well defined templates which will have historical information. It will have place for the business teams to input the next year numbers, and it will be made in a such a way that the business teams who are inputting it, they don't make any mistakes. So there will be a lot of validations, a lot of cells will be locked in that template so that only the relevant portions are updated by the business team. This template creation and template testing often takes a lot of time. It takes maybe somewhere around a week or two for FP&A teams to just create those templates, make sure that those templates are working well, make sure once the template comes back, it should not take them time to consolidate. So that also make sure that those templates are uploadable in the system or uploadable in the budget tools. A lot of times the budget tools will give you the templates which you can just use it to collect inputs and then upload it into the consolidation tool or the budget tool. Once you submit the templates, then you don't just you just don't leave it up to the business teams to submit those numbers. You will have weekly checkpoints somewhere every week of September, and understand where the business teams are at every checkpoint. And a lot of times some teams might face some challenges. There might be some teams who are new. They may require some training as well. So you can all plan all of that during that particular check-ins or weekly updates. A lot of teams might be doing this for say last few years, so they may not require a lot of handling. They might just give you the numbers right away. So depending on different teams, you might receive different inputs, and ideally by the end of the month or by the end of that particular phase, you might have inputs from all the different teams. Now you have all the different inputs from the teams. Now it's your responsibility as FP&A analyst or FP&A manager to consolidate and review all the inputs. Go back to the teams if you have any questions. Ideally, you will be questioned on those numbers by the CEO and the CFO. So you should make sure that you understand each and everything so that you can answer the CFO and CEO in the next level of reviews. Okay. So all of this happens in the next phase, which is consolidation, reviewing the draft consolidated budget, any adjustments that are required. A lot of times there might be different hierarchies, especially in big organizations, there is some bureaucracy. So there are a lot of levels. So there might be country level review, there might be regional level review, there might be global level review. All of those reviews happen during this particular period. And then the CEO, CFO review happens, and then the board review happens. Typically, a CFO, CEO might want to make some changes to the budget. And once those are done, we can then have the board version. Typically, this is not going to be the only thing that the company is working on during this 3 months, right? There might be other priorities also. I'll just give you an example. So, for example, in one of my organizations, there used to be a company offsite somewhere in the month of November. So, first 2 weeks of November were company offsite, and nobody in the company used to be available because everybody was traveling to that offsite location. Okay, so we had to plan for this 2 weeks of gap and make sure that the calendar is created accordingly so that you take care of any other important events that are happening in the organization. Similarly, at the end of the September quarter, the finance teams are busy with the quarter end close. Right. So from maybe 30th of September to 10th of October, nobody would be working on budgets. They might be just busy with closing their books of accounts and making sure that the quarterly books of accounts are properly done. So a lot of these will happen, which also happens in your exam, right? Which also you might want to make contingency plans for when you're sick, when you're traveling. So all of that happens in real life. Similarly, you might want to build those into the calendar, and that's how you prepare the entire budget calendar. Where you can do it in this way, you can do it in a more granular level where you have week 1, week 2, week 3 cut out as a Gantt chart. So this is up to you how you want to present this, but these are different ways to present the budget calendar. Okay, so we have completed the phase 1, which is the budget cycle, which is the planning stage. We have talked about the budget guidelines and budget calendars. I'll take a pause, see if there are any questions. If not, we'll move to the next part. Okay, I'll give it 10 seconds. If not, I'll assume everybody is on the same page. So we looked at the planning stage. Now let's go to the execution stage. So what happened? Okay, I wanted to share something with you. So the sample Excel template, a lot of people requested that in one of the previous webinars. So let me bring that up. So they wanted to get a feel of how the template looks like. So I'll just give you an example of a template. So this is a sample template where what before getting into the template, I should be maybe explaining some background about this organization. So this is a manufacturing organization. They are manufacturing ice cream. So they are manufacturing these different ice sandwich, sugar-free ice creams. So this is the organization. And then they have different flavors, they have different customers, they have different sales managers. That is typically the organization. So what you may want to do is you may want to create a template like the one that you see on the screen. And just as a hypothetical example, in this company, in this organization, there are one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Okay, in this case, there are six sales managers or sales directors. So what I would want to do is my objective is to get to the revenue number for this particular organization. So what do you think? What are the things that you need to get to the revenue number in this sort of an organization? Can you type in the chat box? Let's see if you're able to visualize that. It's a product manufacturing organization. You have different ice cream products, you have different flavors, you have different customers, you have different channels, and then there are six different salespeople in the organization. Okay. So what are the things that you might need to collect from them to be able to get to the revenue number for this organization for the next year? Very simple, right? You just need two things. Number of units estimated to sell. Okay. So that is volume. And what is the second thing? I'm looking for another thing. Yeah, these are revenue drivers. So volume is one. And price. You need two key items, right? Volume and price. There could be other less important ones like discount and maybe more. But these are the two primary ones, which is price and volume. So my objective of this template is to collect the volume information. Pricing is anyways going to be discussed later on with the CEO and the CFO. Okay, based on other factors. So I'm not putting in the pricing here. What my objective of this template is just to collect the volume numbers and I have the pricing. If I want to make changes to that pricing, I can do that and I can arrive at the revenue number using the volume data in this template and the pricing information that I have. So this template is the volume information. Yeah, I can share the template. I'd be happy. But keep in mind that any template that I'll be sharing, they are very specific for a particular organization. For your organization, you may have to make certain changes. However, the concept or the if you understand the core concept, you should be easily be able to adapt it for your own purpose. So I'll be sharing the template at the end. So don't worry about that. So let's take an example of one particular salesperson. Okay, let's take an example for this sales director who's Ajay. Okay, so let's talk about just one sales director right now. Okay, and what I would do is I would want to send this portion of the template to Ajay. So I would want to just cut out this template, put it in another Excel file. And this would be Ajay's template. I would want to send it to Ajay. It could be either through Excel to either through a budgeting tool. It could be either through email, whatever the medium is. Ideally, I want Ajay's input in this particular part of the. I would extract this for Ajay, and what I would include in the template is the historical information. So I would include the historical numbers for the previous financial year. So I am including the volumes for the assuming this is 2024 budget. Adding, I would probably give him the volume numbers for 2023. This will be pre-populated from my end. Okay? If I don't have all the volume numbers till the end of the year, whatever I have, maybe I only say this is happening in July, August. I have it till August, that till August, and I'll ask Ajay to populate this template for me based on his best judgment. Okay, based on Ajay's best judgment, I want him to populate this for me for the remaining part of the year, December, which is the remaining part of the current year, and also for the budget year, which is the next year. So this is your cases, meaning this is your volume. Okay. And using the pricing, this gets automatically updated with the revenue equivalent of it. There are two parts to it. One is the volume, and on the left, for 24, 23. So the orange sections will be populated with the volume number. Then this is revenue number, which will be translated. So there will be a pricing sheet which will multiply the volume into price and then give the pricing, the revenue part. And this will be the last year's revenue number. Orange part will be populated, pre-populated. Blue is what we expect. Basically, what we expect from Ajay is to give the inputs for the volume numbers for the next financial year and the remaining part of it. Okay, now, what do you think Ajay will do once Ajay receives this template? What will he do? Can anybody visualize that? Okay, now Ajay, you assume that you are a sales manager and you are responsible for this particular part of the business. What will you do? Okay, so you are responsible for the owned channel, which is one of the channels in your organization. You are responsible for all the products. You're responsible for all the flavors, and you are responsible for these three stores. Okay, so you are typically responsible for managing these three stores. Now that you know all of this information, what you will do? If you are in Ajay's space, analyze historical data. That is one. So what Ajay will do is Ajay will first look at the historical data which you have given to him. He would take a look at the volume data that you have given to him for 2023. Okay, Mahesh says comparison between budget value and the actual value. Okay, so how will Ajay get these numbers for the next year is my question. Yeah, will he create the numbers himself, forecast market trends to get a rational number? So there could be different ways for Ajay to come up with this number, right? One of the extreme ways could be Ajay would be using his best estimate. Yeah, some story behind it. So one extreme case, let's assume that Ajay doesn't have any other option. He just have to look at the historical data and put the best estimate. But in this case, there's a better alternative, right? So there's a better. Now Ajay is managing these three different stores. Okay. So can Ajay reach out to his point of contact in the Mumbai store, the Burger King store, and the Delhi store and ask his point of contact, okay, last year you ordered X. What is your estimate that you would be ordering for the next year? Can Ajay do that? He can reach out to these three stores and check what is their plan for the next financial year. Can he do? Can Ajay do that? Yes or no? It's easy, right? He's just managing three different relationships and he can just reach out to his relationship manager or whoever the point of contact is in the Mumbai store, in the Burger King, and in Delhi, right? You can just ask them, last year you ordered this much of quantity and we are doing our annual budgeting process and I want to know what can we expect in terms of orders from you in the next financial year. Yeah, I am sure if they have a good relationship, they will be happy to give them some information. Okay, let's assume different types of information. Okay, so there are now, let's assume there are three different customers. One is, say, Burger King. Burger King tells Ajay, okay, we're not doing well this financial year. Okay, so it seems like we might be closing our stores. Okay, this is not reality. This is just, I'm just making it up. So we might be closing our stores in the next year, but we will still need the same level of we will be still be ordering the same level of material from you for the first 4 months. But you're planning to close our stores in May. So maybe the April would be the last month. So Ajay now knows that okay, from May there will be no orders from Burger King. So he can, based on that input, he can update the template. Okay, let's assume another example. Okay, he goes to the Delhi store. Now he asks the Delhi store the same question: what is your expected level of orders for the next financial year? And the Delhi store will let's say Delhi store manager says, we absolutely love your products. We are going to expand in 4 different stores this year. So expect your orders to triple, right? So that is another type of input. Ajay will take that input gladly and come back and he will update that number. So although he lost one client, he now knows that one of his client is expanding. So that sort of things will usually happen in any business. And overall, we need to know what is the expected volume number from each of the sales director. Now, remember, you're only doing this for one of the sales person. There might be hundreds of sales people in the team. So ideally, what would happen is you would create team-wise templates. So these are now names for just for us for our understanding. Ideally, this would be different teams you would be creating templates for. Say there are 25 different sales teams in the company. You will be creating this for the in every sales team, and it will be the responsibility of that particular sales manager to update this template, taking inputs from his team. So that is how typically it works. In many cases, you have CRM systems where this information is already there in many cases. So you may also give them a starting point for the budget based on the CRM numbers that you have, or whatever the starting point you have. You might have already confirmed contracts with some of the clients, so you could put those in the budgeting template, right? What you want to do is make the lives of the salesperson or whoever the person you are collecting the information from as easy as possible, which is the purpose of the template. Okay, so that was the purpose of the template. I'll go back and I'll go back to the presentation. Okay. So we looked at the planning stage. We also looked at the budget guidelines and the budget calendar. We looked at the example of a budget template. Now let's go to the execution. So let's assume that all of the people have submitted the numbers as per the guidelines. They have followed the proper timelines. 99% of people have submitted the data that you had expected. Okay, let's go to the execution stage now. What happens in execution stage? Execution stage is fairly simple in terms of the FP&A team. They have to just collect all the different templates, make sure that they review each and every template. So if I am the FP&A manager, I would reach out to Ajay and understand why he has given me right less numbers for the Burger King store. He might not have put that story in that template, but I would want to know why he has not put any numbers from May onward, right? So then he might tell me, okay, like closing down the store, or he might put a comment here somewhere just so that I can understand it. If I notice that he has put three times the numbers for the Delhi store, I may want to understand what is the reason behind it. Okay, so all that conversation will happen during the execution phase. Once you are satisfied with the inputs, you can then consolidate all of them together. Typically, you would consolidate and put together a company budget. It might be 20 different departments, it might be 50 different teams. Idea is to compile all of that together and put together a company-wide budget. So consolidation is one of the major activities that happens during that. In many cases, a lot of during these days, especially now, a lot of companies use sophisticated budgeting tools where all of this happens inside the tool, so you don't have to do it manually. In some cases, you might have to upload the templates into the tool, but all the consolidation process, the roll-ups, what we call it, they happen automatically. And then there is a tool admin who is responsible for making sure that all the mappings and all are correctly done. So consolidation is one part, reviews is another. So you again, whatever by review I meant was exactly same thing that I mentioned while reviewing this template. So you may want to understand what are the movements over last year. You may want to understand the story behind the numbers, ask reasons for variances. You may want to know, you may want to give some proactive guidance. So for example, Ajay has missed one of his clients in the template, right? So I know one of his clients, he had just started the contract in the end of the year. There was no numbers or no volume in 2023. I forgot to include it in the template and he also forgot to send it back. So I might just remind him, okay, Ajay, this is a new client which is just ordered few quantities in the last week. And do you think he'll continue? Is he a long-term client? And he might say, yes, I will. So you might want to give some proactive guidance also. Typically, this happens during the review process. Review process in many companies is multi-level. So you might review it with the business teams. You might review it with the CFO. You might review it with the country team, regional team. So a lot of levels are there, especially in bigger organizations. Once all the reviews are done, typically you might end up getting from version 1 to, I don't know, version 25 till the time you go from July to December. Whatever the final version is, which is the 25th version or the 35th version, you would take that version and then you would use that as a final locked budget for your next financial year. Okay, a lot of people use Excel. So this is a common question that I get. Which budgeting tool companies use for doing the process? So there are three different answers to this. So if it's a small mid-sized company, they might just use Excel for doing this entire process. Some mid-sized companies or bigger companies may use a combination of Excel and some of these tools that you see on the screen. A lot of companies, which are very big companies, they might just be doing everything inside the tool, depending on the maturity of the finance and FP&A team and the willingness for them to adopt technology. Okay, so Cassandra says she has used SAP. So there are other tools like Oracle, IBM, Anaplan, and there are hundreds of other tools that are available in the market, but these are some of the common ones. So that was the consolidation, budgeting, and the review process. So you consolidate inputs from departments, FP&A first review, make some adjustments if required. FP&A lead and the business teams will review it. CFO will review it. CEO will review it. And then the final approval will go for the final approval in December to the board. So this is the entire consolidation and review process. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the entire budget cycle. So we've covered the different planning, execution, consolidation, and review. So planning was the guidelines and the calendar. Execution was creating templates, sharing the templates, getting the inputs back, making sure that you have weekly check-ins, make sure that the submissions are on track. You don't leave it to luck, right? You may want to handhold them, train them, whatever is required to get your numbers. Ask them questions, get the reviews done, give proactive guidance, make some adjustments if required, and then finally consolidate and get everything reviewed from the business head, CEO, CFO, and then it finally goes to the board. So this is the entire budget cycle that I wanted to cover today, which we are done now. What I will do is I would just quickly take a couple of minutes on some of the different parts of the budget. So typically, I showed you the income statement in the beginning, and it has different parts. So you start with the revenue budget. In product companies, you go to the POGS, which is production inventory, material, labor, manufacturing overhead budget, and then there are other budgets like marketing budget, this R&D budget, admin budget, headcount budget. So these are different components of the budget. They all come together to get you a company-wide budget. All of this we cover in detail in our FP&A program. So we use examples, case studies, real life like data to get you from scratch to create each of these budgets in our FP&A programs. And we've identified these are the 4 or 5 most important skills that CFOs are looking for, which is core FP&A concept, which is budgeting, forecasting, management reporting, financial modeling, data storytelling, business partnering, use of AI in finance and FP&A. So these are some of the core skills, or I would say core finance skills the CFOs are looking for in FP&A professionals. And that is where we have our CGFPA program. It is global certification in FP&A. You learn directly from FP&A leaders, CFOs, guest speakers who have been in FP&A for more than 10 years, CFOs who have been there in finance for more than 15, 20 years. So it's a comprehensive program with 10 different modules. I'll come to the module in a minute. Overall, it's a 6-month certification, which is live, which happens on Saturdays. So you are expected to give 2 to 3 hours of your 2 hours of live, attend 2 hours of live sessions, and then do 1 to 2 hours of self-study during the week. You have access to month-end Q&As after the program is done. Placement support is there in terms of we try to bring you all the vacancies that we have in our network. We try and do our best to get you all the openings that are there in the CFO networks that we have. We also help you with your resume and your interview prep. All of that is a part of the support, which is you get a personalized coach where you can do one-on-one reviews of your resume, one-on-one interview preparation, and you have access to online materials and resources lifetime. Okay. So so I see some questions in the chat box. I'll be taking the questions in a moment. These are the 10 different modules. I'll not go into each of the modules. So budgeting, forecasting, just high level, we make you go from scratch to building the end budget presentation that you can present to the CFO. So that is what we actually do in that particular module. We expect you to use all of the guidance that we have, get from zero to end presentation that you usually typically do in FP&A roles. AI, finance and FP, use of AI tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, for some of the finance use cases that we have identified that people are using it, already started using AI tools in finance. Management reporting, which is different types of management reports like month-end reports, quarter-end reports, some management reporting frameworks like balance scorecards, KPIs, OKRs, profitability analysis, variance analysis, and much more. Financial modeling is very specific to FP&A use cases. So financial modeling for budget, forecast, revenue models, scenario planning, sensitivity analysis, cash flow forecasting. So all of these topics are covered in this. Then we do some data analytics, which is using tools like SQL, Power BI. Financial analysis is a separate module. Data storytelling, presentations, business partnering are key advanced modules for this for the CDF program. Strategy is where we teach how FP are related using a very comprehensive framework called the AFI framework. And all of these are part of the CGFP curriculum, which are 10 different modules. Okay. Eligibility criteria, you need to have a bachelor's degree or equivalent of any professional finance qualification like CA, CPA, CMA, any of these. So if you have this, you are qualified to or eligible for the CGFP program. Typically, the process involves attending the live sessions at least 50%. So you need to attend at least 50% sessions live. Recordings are provided. So in case you miss a session here and there, you can watch the recordings and come back to the live sessions and catch up with it. There is a capstone project that I mentioned, which you need to submit, which will be a guided capstone project. We'll guide you step by step. That is where the application or the learning will come from. So we make sure that we give you enough assignments, projects, so that you actually apply whatever taught in the program. Also, this is CPD accredited, so you can, if you are a part of any of the accounting bodies where you require to submit CPE on an annual basis, you can use the CGFPA credits or the CGFPA hours as your CPD hours for that particular purpose. Okay, it's the next cohort is starting on 22nd of March. It's starting first week of April. The induction or the orientation will happen on 22nd of March. As I mentioned, it is 2 hours every Saturday. Overall, you need to give 3 to 4 hours, 2 hours for the live session, and 1 to 2 hours for pre-reading or self-study. So this is a little bit about the CGFP programs, and there are dozens of testimonials we've already conducted. We are now doing this 4th cohort, so we've already done 3 cohorts before this. The 3rd cohort is still in progress, and we have got some wonderful reviews. A lot of people have transitioned into FP&A roles after this. For example, I would say Ravi, who got into an FP&A role just 2 months back while he was going to the CGFPA program. Farhan, who was with us, he was working in controller role in one of the organizations, and he could convince his organization to get an internal mobility into FP&A after doing the CGFPA program. A lot of people have managed to migrate into FP&A roles after doing CGFPA. Also, a lot of people have been able to get a better grip of their FP&A. What I have seen is, especially if you are new to FP&A role, you find it very overwhelming. You might find that to be slightly challenging because you're not used to the nature of the work. It might be slightly unstructured and slightly ambiguous, right? So all of this gets covered in the CGFPA program, where you step by step through all the FP&A processes and you learn it in a structured format. So yeah, the next cohort is starting 22nd March, the last day or the final. Already 2 rounds of applications have closed. We already have about 12 to 30 students who have enrolled. We have about 5 to 6 seats remaining, which will get filled in the next 10 days. So if you're interested in the program, I would highly encourage you to make the application. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you in one of the other webinars or in one of the programs. Thanks, and thank you so much for joining today.